going to be filming everything that happens now. Brian, if you'd like to get underway, the stage is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Henry. Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? If you say in the chat box, where are you listening from? Where are you? What time is it? There's sound, but no possibility to understand it. London, 5 p.m., Pakistan. Okay, looks like most people can hear. So just let me begin by introducing myself and giving a little bit of background information. My name's Brian Boyd, and I'm an English teacher here in Bangkok, Thailand. I've been teaching English for about 13 years. And about 9 years ago, I created this superhero character, Grammarman comic. I've been making this since 2005, and Grammarman is targeted at people who are teaching English as a second language or who are studying English. And the idea of the comic was to make learning grammar a little bit more fun, a little bit more enjoyable for students. And if you've never read Grammarman comic before, let me just quickly explain how the stories work. First, the students read the comic just like a normal superhero adventure. Then, when they get to the end, they'll find that there's some kind of puzzle for them to solve, some sort of problem to be answered. Here are some examples of some final panels. So you can see each time the story ends with Grammarman breaking the fourth wall and turning to the reader for assistance. There's usually some kind of error to find or some vocabulary hunt. It could be related to pronunciation, spelling, tenses, all kinds of things. If you'd like to check out more Grammarman, here's some links that could be useful. The first one takes you to my website, where you'll find about 20 episodes of Grammarman. The second one, that's Grammarman's Facebook profile. Come find him on Facebook, and you can communicate directly. Third one is Grammarman's Facebook page, and finally, number 4 there is Twitter. Grammarman's quite new to Twitter, but please come along and give him a tweet. And around the same time as I started to make Grammarman comic, I also started to make, oh, I do beg your pardon, there's one more place where you can get Grammarman comic, onestopenglish.com. This website has, I think, 36 episodes of the comic in their archive. One Stop English, that's a Macmillan website. Check that out. And yeah, the comics I've been making with students is for about the same amount of time, 9 years, I think. I run this as a project maybe once per year with my students, and there's a link at the bottom of this slide if you'd like to check some examples out. I add to this all the time, and sometimes teachers from around the world send me comics that they've made with their students, and some of them are on there as well. And after today's session, if you feel inspired to make comics with your students, do send them to me and I'll add them onto the website, share them with everyone. So let's start with a little discussion. Here's 3 questions to consider. Have you ever made comics with your own students? Have you tried that before? What other ways do you use comics when teaching? And if you've never used comics before, why not? What puts you off? Let's see, I'm just scrolling down here. No, never. Yes, I did. Could you expand your answers into sentences, if possible? No, because. Yes, I did. What happened? I've used comics as a reading exercise, picture story. Don't know how and don't know what to do. Okay, not characters for our culture. It's not so popular. No, but we'd like to. Haven't used them. Class book. Okay. Blanks in the captions. Sometimes working in the multi for creating a picture story. So we can see right away there's a real range of experience with using comics in the classroom. Quite a lot of you are saying, I've never tried anything like this. Some are saying, I'd like to. And there are quite a lot of you who already have used comics quite a lot to different degrees of success. Printed versions with empty bubbles, that's a really good activity. Just give them a comic with all the text blanked out. So this is what we're going to try today. As I said, this link at the bottom of the slide here will take you to the archive online. I think there's almost 100 comics there made by students. And that's the target of today's session. We're going to look at the different stages if you'd like to try and make something like this with your students. I should just tell you, my setup is going to be different from your setup. Where I teach, I usually have no more than 20 students in a class, and I meet those students once per week for a 2-hour lesson. You'll all have different class sizes, different responsibilities to the syllabus, time frames. So as we go through these steps, you should be thinking to yourself, how could I adapt this for my class, my students? What could I add? What would I not use? But just consider this like a loose framework. Here's some feedback from my students. Last time I did this project, I gave them a little questionnaire that they could fill in anonymously. Did you enjoy doing this project? Most of the students responded favorably to this. A lot of them said they really enjoyed working in a group, collaborating on something. They liked the idea that there's an end product, a finished thing that they're working towards. And they liked the idea that it was an imaginative project, that they could get creative with the English that they know. Then I asked them, do you think the project has helped your English skills? Again, a lot of positive feedback here. A lot of students said that they felt they had a better understanding of tenses and various grammar points that we'd studied. They were able to incorporate what they learned into the dialogue of the comic they were making. And then I asked them, how did they feel? How do you feel about your group's finished comic? And you can see here, again and again, a lot of them felt really, really proud, very happy of what they'd achieved. And for me, that's part of the key why this project seems to work so well with young learners, is because they take a great pride in what they're doing. They get very involved in it, very engaged. They're very excited about seeing it go online when it's ready. And in that way, the project kind of just sells itself. They just love doing it. Now, here we see an overview of the project. I usually approach this in 3 stages. As I said before, I get about 2 hours per week with my students. I usually use an hour to study the course book, and then the other hour, maybe 45 minutes, is a session of project work. So just to give you an idea here, the first stage, generating interest and introducing the project, I would do that in 1 session. So that's a 45-minute lesson. And we'll look at that a little bit more closely in a moment. Then initial ideas, researching existing comics, feedback, creating characters and their world. I would use 2 or 3 sessions, so that's 45 minutes 3 times to develop all of that. By that time, they're ready to start making the comic, and that's the most time-consuming part of it. For this, it could be anything from 8 to 12 sessions. It seems to vary each time I do it. So you'd need to think how much time you have available to you. Can you allow this amount of time for working on such a project? How would you adapt these ideas to fit your time frame? So I'll start with generating interest, getting started. For me, when I want to generate interest at the start of this project, I usually find it's best to personalize it to what the students enjoy reading. So on this slide, you can see a selection of comics that are my favorites. I've spent many hours reading these comics you see here. I'm interested to know, what do you read? Maybe you read comics now, maybe you have happy memories of what you read as a child. Put in the chat box, what comics have happy memories for you? What comics entertain you? Peanuts, yeah. I grew up with Peanuts. Deadpool. Maybe Deadpool movie coming. Marvel comics, still reading them today. Me too. Calvin and Hobbes, Spider-Man. I don't know, Topolino. Charlie Brown, oh my goodness, going fast. X-Men, Spider-Man, Tintin. My 5-year-old son loves reading Tintin right now. Children are interested. It's Italian. It's Italian, okay. I know Dylan Dog, is that Italian? The Walking Dead, Peanuts. A real big range. You can see that a lot of people have a lot of different tastes in comics. So this is what I would use to get the students talking together, sharing their interests. What's their favorite character? Why do they like that character? And then I would put a few discussion questions on the board and get the students into groups, 4 or 5 people in a group. So at the beginning of the session, I used these 3 questions to get just to get some knowledge of your experience. Have you made comics? If not, why not? Have you used them? In the chat box now, could you suggest what questions do you think you could put on the board to get a little comics discussion going with your students? You've already asked them to talk about what they like to read, what their favorite characters are. What other questions do you think we could ask them? Asterix, Disney, Lucky Luke. What is your hero? Yeah, who is your favorite comic book character? Who is your hero? What other comic-related questions could we ask? What is a comic? Popular for all ages in your country. Favorite character. Naming villains. Why do you like that hero? That's a good one. Who's your favorite and why do you like them? Can you describe what you've seen in the Ictress? I've never used comics before. Why do we need comics? What kind of story would you like to create? What will be the aim? Who do you want to be like? What superpower would you like to have? I like that. Dinara. Kyoko, I've had this problem before where maybe 1 or 2 students don't like drawing, but for this project the students work in a team. There'll be 3 to 5 students in the team. So all you need to make sure of is that each group, each team has 1 or maybe 2 good artists or students who enjoy drawing. The other students can take on other tasks such as putting ink over another student's pencils, drawing borders, text, writing the story, editing. There's lots of little jobs that can be done within the team, so you don't need every student in the class to enjoy drawing. So let me go on to one more slide here. Comic characters. After trying to get the students chatting about comics, getting them interested in this and showing them some existing comics, I would then do a brainstorm with the students. I would ask every student to name a comic character. Let's do that now in the chat box. Name a comic character that you know. Here they come. Snoopy, Batman. Don't repeat anybody if you can. Sailor Moon, Spider-Man, Mickey Mouse, the Smurfs. Sometimes when I do this brainstorm, students will start naming a lot of American male superheroes. So we get Spider-Man, Captain America, Thor, Batman. And I'll ask them, how about some female heroes? Here's Wonder Woman, just popped up. Marco says. And how about, oh, there's She-Hulk. How about some comic characters that are not American? How about some characters that are not super-powered? Maybe characters that are detectives or pirates or cartoon animals such as Donald Duck we have here, SpongeBob, Dick Tracy, Garfield, Scooby-Doo. So I try to make as much of a variety as possible, trying to get the students thinking along other lines, so not all comics that they could create are going to be superhero comics. They can make a detective mystery story, a horror story, a comedy, something with little talking animals, anything they like. And if I just pop back a few slides, that is pretty much covers what I would do in stage 1. Sorry. This one. Slide 18. That's how I would get stage 1 done, all in one session. I would ask the students what they read. I would put some questions on the board to get them talking about comics in groups, let each other know if they enjoy them, why. If they don't enjoy them, why. We can even find out if they're good at drawing. And this link here will take you to the online archive. So usually when I'm in that first lesson, I also give the students laptop computers, and they have about 30 minutes time of free reading where they can just go to these online comics and read what they'd like to read. And then finally, I would do this brainstorm, and this brainstorm leads into the next section of the project. Next, I'm going to get them to research an existing comic character, and at the end of lesson 1, I usually set this as a homework. So everybody's going to go home and make some notes about one character. Do a little practice now. In the class, I would usually put this up on the board and just get the students shouting out answers to me. If I use a character that everybody knows, Spider-Man. Okay, in the chat box, can you tell me anything you know about Spider-Man's background and history? What do we know? Yeah, he's a student. What's his real name? What's Spider-Man's real name? His job is a photographer. He's shy. Peter Parker, bitten by a radioactive spider. There we go. He lost his parents. Let's move quickly along to strengths and weaknesses. What can you tell me about his powers? What are his abilities? What can Spider-Man do? He has a spider sense that warns him of danger. He lives with not his granny. Maybe someone can change that. He can climb walls. He can spin webs. He's as fast as a ray. He can climb vertical walls. What other characters are in his life? That's right, Nabila, Aunt May is his. He lives with Aunt May. What other characters are in his life? His best friend, his girlfriend, his boss, his aunt and uncle, Mary Jane Watson, and his main villain, Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus. Spider-Man has a lot of villains, and the students can usually tell you quite a lot of them. So I would take some time in class to fill up this research sheet, and then I would pop back to the brainstorm that we did, and I would invite each student to name one character they're going to take responsibility for. They go home, their homework is to fill up a sheet like this. If you'd like this sheet, this link at the bottom here, this link here will take you to a PDF to get this sheet. I usually enlarge it up to A3 size. So each student tells me, okay, I'll do Garfield, I'll do Scooby-Doo, I'll do Batman. They all go home, and then they come back the following week with something like this. Whoops. So this is an example from one of my students. The character is called Conan. Detective Conan. I think it's a Japanese comic, and I believe the stories of Conan are loosely based on, or they're inspired by, the stories of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. And you can see the students made some simple notes here. And at this point, we have a little speaking activity. The students get into groups, and I explain to them that we're going to do a speaking activity similar to in the IELTS test, where a candidate is expected to talk for up to 2 minutes without stopping on a given topic. So the students are going to give a little presentation in groups of 4 or 5. Each student will take turns to give a little presentation on the character that they researched. I usually give them a 2-minute timer, and I remind them, try to give 30 seconds to background and history, 30 seconds to strengths and weaknesses, and 30 seconds to the other 2 sections. Last time I did this, I found it worked really well. Every student had a really good try at it, and a lot of them were able to speak for 2 minutes without hesitation using their notes. From there, the groups are going to now design a character. Actually, up till now, I haven't talked about grouping, and they can do all of those activities up until this point without being in groups. But at this stage, they will need to be sitting in groups that they're then going to work in for the rest of the project. With my classes, I let them usually just sit with their friends. If they can behave well, if they can assure me they're going to get on with the work, I'll let them sit with whoever they want. But you can group students as you wish. The only important thing is that each group has at least one student who's comfortable being the artist for the group, somebody who likes drawing. So this sheet is almost identical to the research sheet. It's got the same 4 sections and a place for them to draw a picture of the character they design. Here's the link if you'd like to get that as a PDF download. So in class, the students start to make little notes here about the background and the history of the character they're going to use in their comic. So the idea of this process is to get the students thinking about the character as a whole person with friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, teachers, bosses, villains, enemies, powers and weaknesses. And here's an example. So this is the character design by one of my classes, Holy the Hero. In the classroom, they were making just 1-word, 2-word notes here. But then each student in the group was assigned one section to take responsibility for as a homework. So they each returned the following week with 1 paragraph, and they wrote it up neatly onto the design sheet. And so this character became Holy Hero we see here. Here's another example. Thank you, Mohammed. I'm doing my best to keep the pace going here because there's quite a lot to cover, but any comments, throw them in. So here's another example. This is chart Mans. Again, 4 students each wrote 1 paragraph of this design. They negotiated it together, then they did it for homework and came back to class the following week. And this design later became this comic. So, at this point, we've covered generating interest and introducing the project. The end of this stage is giving the students each 1 character to go home and research. And then they'll return the following week and speak. That can be a little speaking activity if you want. And then they go into groups and create the characters and their world. So we then move into stage 3, which this stage can get quite messy. What you'll find is, what if most of the learners dread the idea of drawing? Well, Mohammed, in my experience, I usually find there are at least 4 students in a class of 20 that enjoy drawing or are happy to take on the job. So all you need is 1 artist for each group. So this stage 3, making the comic, as I was saying, this can get a little bit messy. Up until now, the students have been following quite organized steps, and they're all doing the same thing at the same time. Once they begin making the story, you'll find they're all at different stages of completion, and they all need different kinds of help. In the middle of the project, it can seem to get a little out of control and disorganized. You may find there are times when you find yourself thinking, how am I going to bring this all together? But trust me, it always comes together. It always comes to a lovely finished product at the end. Have faith. So let's go to scripting and storyboarding. The next thing I will do is give the students, let's hope so, Marco. Yes, instead of, and to be fair, instead of superhero comics, I always encourage students, you don't have to feel you make a superhero kind of comic. You can make fairy tales, you can make detective stories, you can even relate it to what you've been studying in the main syllabus, maybe something historical, maybe something relating to the country where you live. It doesn't have to be superheroes and supervillains. That just seems to be the most popular kind of comic. But students should feel free to make whatever they want to make. So I would then give the students some kind of template to begin formulating the ideas of their story. These are 3 different kinds I've used. You could make any kind you want. Novikova, Marina, parents that I've talked to have been really, really positive about this kind of project, usually because their child comes home full of enthusiasm. They want to talk about what they've made in school. They put a lot more energy and enthusiasm into it than they might into a grammar exercise in a book. Because they're really excited about the end product they're working towards. So parents are usually really happy to see their son or daughter very engaged in something they're working on in English class. Let's take a closer look. This is a really simple template you could use. It's just to get the students thinking about what's going to be on each page of the comic. I usually tell them it's going to be a 4-page comic. If you have a smaller time frame, go for 2 pages or 3 pages. Sometimes violence in comics, and maybe I'll talk about that a little later at the end. I lost my thread. Sorry, the story planning stage. I give them 4 pages to work on. Occasionally students will negotiate with me and say, we've got a story that we think is 6 or 7 pages. If they can assure me that the work's going to get done and that if necessary they'll do some of it as homework to make sure it gets done in the time frame, I do let them have a larger comic, give them that freedom of choice to make the comic any size that they want. But 4 pages seems to work well. Here's a slightly more complex story template. It's not for the full comic, it's just to get them thinking about what they're going to do on the first 2 pages. How will they introduce the different characters? How will they set the scene? And how will they make the reader interested in what's coming? To Yana, yes, it is group work. I usually do this in groups of 4 or 5 students at a time. And this is a more complex story plan. This encourages them to think about all the elements of the story. And I sometimes use this where I tell the students they should choose one of these phrases and find a way to incorporate it into their story. There's all kinds of different ways you can get a story plan in place, but maybe this is the most simple. And then it's time to look at scripting. So at this point, I'll bring to the classroom 3 comics from my collection to show them. Bone, Conan, and The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, I can use any 3 comics to do this. These are just 3 examples I've used. And usually before the class, I will choose a suitable page from each of these 3 comics. A page that has a nice balance of action happening, but with a variety of text on there. And I'll spend some time typing up a little script for each page of the comic. And at this point, I'll take the comics to the classroom, I'll walk around and let the students see the covers of the comic, but they don't see inside yet. They only see these 3 written pages. But they're usually pretty excited to read what's on those pages and to see how a comic script looks. At this point, you can get them thinking about the different ways that you can use English on the comic page. Here's a closer look. So this is one page that's inside this issue of Amazing Spider-Man. So I'm just giving them time to read it. You can see that this page has 6 panels. 6 boxes with pictures on that page. And each panel has a panel description. A dark sewer, a green humanoid monster stands in pain, with purple blood dripping from numerous cuts. To the left, we see a close-up of Spider-Man's hand. And you can see in panel 1, the monster in the story speaks 3 lines of dialogue. So there'll be 3 balloons. There'll be 3 balloons for the monster speaking in that panel. You can also draw attention to things like sound effects, kerwham. This is the sound of an explosion in the story. And captions. Dialogue typically appears in circular balloons. Captions commonly are in white rectangles. Not always, but they're usually those little rectangles which have messages like, meanwhile, in the sewer, or 2 hours later, or at that moment. Captions that act as little storytelling markers. Novikova, it took me weeks and weeks to prepare all of this material. After they've had a chance to read, I will then give this little quiz to each team. So in my classes there are 4 teams, usually with 4 or 5 students in each, and we do this as a race. And I've set this up so that some of the questions are specific to one of the comics. Some of them they have to compare and contrast the comics. I'll give you an example. Let's see. Questions 3, 7, 8, and 11. So at this point, they still haven't seen the pages of the comic. They're just focusing in. It's like a reading comprehension and a jigsaw reading. And whichever 3 pages of comic you use, you would need to take some time to prepare this little quiz and a page of script for each. Finally, I'll show the students the pages. Now, usually I will enlarge these. This would be A3 size, this black and white page of bone. And I'll fix them to the walls around the room, and then the students have about 10 or 15 minutes to get up out of their chairs and go and compare the script to what they see. Compare the script to what they see on the page. Bone speaks twice in this panel, panel 3. Panel 1, 2, 3. Where the heck are those guys? We're going straight into the mountains. Here's the final panel. Bone is asleep. The map is still in his hand. The sky is dark, and the moon is in the sky. So the students can begin to see. How a script works and how the script relates to a final comic. And that's their next homework. Actually, before we go to that, let's just take a look. This example here is an episode of Grammarman comic. Oops. Slide 37. This is Grammarman episode 82. And just look at this and tell me in the chat box, what different ways can you see of using English within a page of comic? Someone, Juliania says, we call them balloons. Not balloons, but speech bubbles. I call them both. I call them speech balloons and speech bubbles, dialogue balloons, dialogue bubbles. Tell me in the chat, what other ways can we use English in a page of comic? You can see dialogue balloons already. Julia asks about the language level. It could be anything from elementary up to advanced level. Most of my students are pre-intermediate to upper intermediate. Images with writing on them, Marco. Yes, like in panel 1, Willard's Weapon Warehouse. Sometimes words can be a part of the artwork. Description at the top, panel 1. It's used for commands. Yes. Jigsaw, I'm not sure what that means. Dialogue cloud. Yep. Countable nouns. Sorry, I think I didn't make my question clear. I meant the variety of ways that English can appear on the comic page. Let me move to the next slide here. There we go. So it can be part of the art, like this sign in panel 1. It can also be on a computer screen, like here. Password accepted. Caption. Almost like this is the reader's voice talking to Grammar Man. Spoken dialogue. Here we have sound effects to show that this bomb is ticking and that he's tapping on the keyboard of the computer. And sometimes we see the character's thoughts. It's quite interesting to point that out to students. In comics, they're kind of a unique storytelling method where we can often see what the character is saying and what the character is thinking at the same time. And what we're saying is not always the same as what we're thinking. So that's quite a clever little writing device that students can use. So the students have mapped out their story, and I tell each student, again, you're going to take responsibility for one page of the story. They go home, they take some of the sample scripts from Bone or Spider-Man with them as a model that they can use. And they have to take their basic ideas and consider how many panels will I need to tell this section of the story, what sound effects do I need, how will the dialogue happen. So they come back to class the following week, hopefully each with one page of story. The most recent time I did this project, I noticed that without any prompting, the students in each group were swapping their information for Line, WhatsApp, Facebook, and Twitter. At home, they were communicating with each other, negotiating what's happening on your part, what happens in the final panel, how should I begin page 3. So outside of the classroom, they were all sharing their ideas and cooperating together. And so this is one script that came back for a comic called Robert the Robot. Let's take a closer look. This is page 2. And the script is quite similar to what the final page is. Let's just see. But at this stage, I tell the students that what they have in their script does not need to stay finalized. It's only when they're working on this final page that things are set in stone. In the early stages, there's going to be a lot of development and throwing out ideas that don't work, making ideas better. So that's what we're going to look at next. How do we get from this scripted idea to a beautiful page of finished comic art? Now this is an early draft of a comic. The comic is called Dash and Thomas, and in the beginning I give the students a lot of scrap paper and I just tell them, okay, let's start developing your script into a comic. And they've seen a lot of examples, they know how it works, and they're usually all very excited and get involved in this part of the project. You can see here there are comments by me where I didn't understand things, or there's corrections, and there are purple notations by the students in response to my comments. They redrafted this, but I still found it very confusing. So a lot of the time, you have to play devil's advocate when you're evaluating their early drafts. The students have talked about it a lot. The idea is very clear in their head, but when they put it onto the comic page, it doesn't communicate well to another audience. So the students have to be encouraged to think in terms of their audience. Will their reader understand this? How can the reader know who this character is? So yeah, you play devil's advocate. When you sit with the students, you have to ask them, but who's this? But I don't understand. Where are they now? Is this yesterday or is this today? You have to ask them a lot of questions and encourage them to make the story take shape so that it'll be understood by anybody who reads it. Here's the third draft. And I tell the students early on, we are going to be drafting and redrafting this. Finally, if everything seems okay, I will okay a page and give them some nice clean white paper, and they begin to draft it onto there. You only need one student to do the pencil artwork of this. When the pencil artwork has been okayed by me and all the grammar and the spelling is as correct as it's going to be, then they're allowed to add black ink and colors, but only after it's been checked. I'm really strict about that with them. I tell them it's going to go online, it's going to go on the Grammarman website, it's got to have good grammar and good spelling, and it's got to make sense. If I go back through these slides, I'll show you that process again. So from a script, there's this early draft. This is a redraft. Oops, sorry. First draft, redraft, final draft, and final page of artwork. So I'm not sure why this is switching around. So what could possibly go wrong? That's what I'm going to ask you now. From getting your students from this script, Henry, are you moving that? Is that me? From this script to this final page, I'm on slide 40, Henry. From this script to this final page, what problems do you think could arise? Tell me in the chat box here. What problems do you foresee? Some people have said some of their students hate drawing. You don't need everybody to be drawing, only one student per group. Students who don't enjoy drawing might enjoy developing the story, writing dialogue, coloring. Students don't do their homework. This does happen. Usually you can tell the students don't let your team down. There's 3 other people here relying on you. Don't be the one who comes to class with no finished script. Don't be the one who doesn't get the work done on time. They can get discouraged by redrafting. You have to tell them right from the beginning, a lot of your ideas and a lot of these papers we're working on will eventually go to the bin, but we're working towards a finished comic that will be of a high standard. So that happens. Yeah, they start to get discouraged. Sometimes I give them a total break from it. So one week I'll just tell them we're not going to do project work this week. We'll do a game, or we'll do some more work from our course book. Sometimes I just give them a little break, and then they'll be more enthusiastic when they return. The timing can be a problem. That's why I said a lot of this as homework. I tell the students at the start, quite a lot of this will be done at home. I especially like, if possible, to get them doing drawing or coloring at home rather than using class time for drawing pictures. How many hours does it take? It can take up to 16 sessions, and a session is between 45 minutes and an hour. At this stage, when they're making the final comics, there's no planning for the teacher to do. You just tell them, get into your project groups, let's get working. And then you have to move around the class, sharing your time as much as possible, advising and helping and encouraging and spotting things that need to change. And you're right, they can be discouraged if it lasts too long. give them a break from it if they need it. Can we squeeze it to 2 classes? I'm not sure what you mean. 2 class times? This is not one lesson. This is done over a whole term, like an ongoing project that the students work on. Let's take a look at some of the errors. Here's a list of 15 things that I find commonly happen. Yes, Dr. Mayada, 1 project for the whole semester. It's an ongoing thing that they work on alongside working on the rest of their syllabus, and you can incorporate the syllabus into it, especially grammar points. If you've studied question tags, tell the students, I'd like you to find 3 places to put question tags in your story. Before break, we studied the passive form. I'd like to see 2 passive sentences somewhere in your story now, so they can begin to use whatever they're learning from the syllabus directly into their comic. You can tell them, how about some extreme adjectives? Let's put 6 extreme adjectives somewhere in your story. So looking down this list, if there's any of these you'd like me to elaborate on, or tell what do I mean by it, just say what number. Number 1, 1 student working and 3 students watching. At times you'll have 1 student doing artwork and 3 students just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for them to draw. There's always something that they can do. Encourage them to they could be drawing the panel layout for page 2. They could be inking some artwork that's already fixed. They could be adding dialogue to some finished artwork. They could be coloring. They could even be helping another group. So if there's nothing at all to do in their group, take them to another group and make them a useful pair of hands over there. But I always tell the students, you're going to get 2 marks for this work. 1 mark for the finished comic, and you will all get the same for that, but also 1 mark for how much effort you put in and how much you help your team and help your group. So always be looking for work to do. They should always be finding a task for themselves. Sorry, I've missed the chat here a little bit. Number 5, students speaking mostly in first language. I tend to let them. Sometimes I'll make a little joke with them. Why? Come on, you're drawing a picture, you're coloring in, and you're speaking in Thai. So what English are you learning? I try to encourage them to speak English, but if they're more comfortable discussing the points of their story in their first language, I just let them get on with it. Just because they're so focused on the task they're doing, they're really engaged in learning what they're writing and using the right English for it. Bonus point for using English, good idea. 3rd mark for not using mother tongue. What else? Can parents help children making comics at home? Yeah, there's no reason why not. The same project could be done following whatever steps. Let me go through this list a moment. Inappropriate content and bullying. Let me just mention that. Number 13. I have had situations where students are working on a comic that is making fun of another student in the class. So they're using the comic to bully another student. I had to catch that quite early on and make sure it didn't happen. Also, inappropriate content. Older teens will sometimes try to use, swear words or inappropriate content in a comic. Again, you have to tell them there's a limit on it, because I'm going to put this on my website. I don't want my mother to read it. I can't have that bad language in your comic. Please change it. Here's some sample slides from early drafts of students. On this slide, there are 3 problems. In the beginning here, panel 1, this caption is redundant because the same message is also here in the dialogue balloon. So I would encourage students to not repeat themselves. Doraemon becomes a vampire. Oh no, you've changed into a vampire. So maybe one of these could go. Another problem down here is Doraemon, please, it's not funny. but it's really funny to me. They've got the dialogue balloons in the wrong order here. What is the age of the students? These students who made these drafts are aged between 11 and 16, I think. Mainly 12, 13, 14 years old. Another problem here is taking too long on the artwork in a draft. Now, this picture of Doraemon could have been just a stick man. It could have been drawn really quickly. Considering this artwork is eventually not going to be used in the final comic, it's to be thrown away. So you have to constantly remind students of that. They do like to spend a long time trying to make the drawings perfect. They don't need to do that until they're making the final thing. Tetiana, it will be on YouTube, I believe. Rough sketch is okay. That's right, Dr. Mariada. This is the same thing. You can see this is just a draft. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words in English and about 40 minutes spent drawing this page of artwork that will eventually go into the bin. So I have to remind them, this is more like it. The artwork here is nice and simple. What's the problem here? And how would you solve this problem? What problem do you see with this dialogue balloon, and how could we fix it? Nobody? That's right. Yeah, there we go. Cramped balloons, too much text, order of the dialogue. Why do you want me to do this? Because if we destroy this world. Yes, the dialogue's in the wrong order, and sorry. The dialogue's in the wrong order, and in the top balloon here is very cramped. So how could we avoid this cramped balloon problem? It's very common. Can you think, why does it happen, and what's the simple answer to it? Tetiana says, not good pictures. These are meant to be very simplistic, basic pictures done quickly. That's right, Vicky. You get the students to write the words first and then draw the balloon after. The problem is they often draw the balloon and then try to squash all the writing into the balloon. So simply by highlighting that to them on the board and showing them, if you write the text first, then add the balloon, it'll fit nicely. Here's the same thing. It's another example of the text being really cramped and perhaps too much text. Write, then draw, correct. Use more scenes, simpler dialogues. Yeah, for this kind of text, they're trying to tell too much story in one text balloon, and I'd encourage them to redraft this and simplify the text. They might need help with it. There are grammar mistakes also. They will eventually be edited as we go along from draft to draft. Okay. In this example, slide 52, you can see the artwork is nice and simple. The students haven't wasted a long time drafting it, but they are over-relying on captions. They're trying to tell the full story in captions, like here. Then Doraemon goes to ask his mother in the kitchen. Well, we can see that he's walking down the stairs. We don't really need to tell the story entirely through captions. I would encourage these students to try and use some more balloons, or maybe show his thoughts. And this is another one. They're trying to tell a lot of the story in one big caption. They killed Dracula, and after Dracula died, Dino Sword consult with Drago that what they're going to do next. I think we have to keep walking. I think I told these students to redraft it and break it up into 3 or maybe 4 panels. Yeah, just to not try to communicate too much all in one panel. We can see that Dracula is killed, and we can see that Dino Sword and Drago are consulting. I would maybe make that 2, 3, or even 4 panels. Here's another example of, well, what's the problem? What's been, oh, you can see the students have put the dialogue in the wrong order. and then they've numbered it. But I told them, we can't just number it in the final artwork. You'll have to redraw that and rearrange the text. They've used numbers. Yeah, they've used numbers to try and organize that. I don't think such words as killed should be used. Well, I've never censored violence very much in the comics, Mariner, but it is a good point. And here's the same problem again. Number 1, I love you. Number 2, I love you too. Number 3, will you marry me? Number 4. Pepper, yes, I think it's going on YouTube. So again, the students, this is a very common problem. They would need to reorganize these dialogue balloons. This is an example of coloring in the textbooks. The text balloons. The page on the left and the page on the right were not colored by the same artist. They're working in the same group, but the guy on the left has used the color quite subtly. The person on the right finished coloring this page and then decided to color in all of the text balloons. Unfortunately, it makes the text much more difficult to read. So I usually tell the students to leave text balloons and captions white. If a student does color them like this, you can usually use an eraser to lighten it, or Photoshop to enlighten it after it's been scanned. Here's another common problem. Well, what do you think is the problem here? No words. Eleanor, that's right, no dialogue. You'll get students who make a big page of art and then they'll use lots of one-word exchanges. No, please, no way, arg, help, why? So you have to encourage the students, maybe at the scripting stage, try to get as much conversation in there as possible, longer sentences. I made them redraft this and make it a little better. There we are. We're at the end of the session now. That's 1 hour. I'm going to stay online and answer some of the questions I might have missed. I think Henry's going to come back on. I'd like to say thanks very much to One Stop English and Macmillan for inviting me to be a part of this webinar series. I'd like to thank Henry Firth, who's behind the scenes helping with the technical side. I'd like to thank my colleague and friend Lorraine Moore, who was very supportive and gave a lot of input to this session, helping with it. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you guys, 250 people who've logged in this evening. I hope it's been useful. People who are asking if it's going to be uploaded, yes, it is. Henry, are you there? Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're welcome. You're all very welcome.
Hi guys. Yeah, I'm back. Thanks, Brian. Great job. With lots of lovely comments coming in for you in the chat box. So it looks like everyone's found the session really useful, enjoyed themselves too. I hope you've all taken away a lot of ideas. And as Brian was saying, we have a few minutes now where if you've got any extra questions that you'd like to ask Brian, then he's going to stick around for a few minutes and we can go over those quickly too. Brian did a great job of answering a lot of what came in as he went through the talk anyway, but if anyone's got something that they'd still like to ask, then now's your chance. So we're going to just stay here for a little while longer. But
did you notice any questions
Brian,
that I missed, Henry?
You're doing a very professional job of integrating them within the talk, so I didn't see any other than the old technical ones about the sound that
thank you.
I was trying to help people with.
Monique asks.
Oh yeah.
Monique asks about shorter activities. I do have lots, Monique. There are so many. There are dozens of ways of using comics just for one lesson or a 30-minute activity. that would be a whole other webinar. I decided to do this one tonight because it's the one that I feel that students get the most benefit from. It's the one that I get the best feedback and the best reaction from, although this is quite a big project to take on and it can be quite a lot of work for the teacher. It's very, very rewarding when they finally go online.
Brian,
Nabila, that would be great. And if your students make... Sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to read out Nabila's question. She was asking if she can... Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, if she can use your ideas for her project on Shakespeare.
Yeah. Nabila, that would be great. If your students make comics of any of Shakespeare's plays, his stories, send the comics to me and I'll put them on the Grammarman website, share them with everybody and get lots of feedback for your students. I think it would be a great way to make the students interested in Shakespeare making comics. I do have one comic on my website, which is the story of Alexander the Great, where the teacher, I think it was a teacher here in Bangkok, Alexandra maybe, she had her students make a big 10-page epic comic all about Alexander the Great and the wooden horse of Troy. So yeah, go for that.
A few more questions have come flying in, Brian. So Tatiana was wondering if it's better for this task to be set as homework or if it should be done in class. So writing the comic strips.
Okay. Okay. So Tatiana, I do both. I devote a little bit of class time to it every week for a whole term, but I also set quite a lot of it as homework. They do reading research, they write scripts, they write character designs. All of those things can be done as homework. And usually, as they get enthusiastic about it, the artists in each team will be happy to take a page home and do the art at home. I especially try to get the art done as homework so that we're not using English lesson time just to color in pictures. Okay.
Excellent. And a few people were wondering if there's any other good sites out there which will explain some golden rules for creating comics, Brian. So things that they should be. Oh, you're not hearing me. I'll repeat that one. What are the best sites?
Yeah, no, I can hear you now.
For sort of getting the golden rules of making comics. Oh, you can hear me. Great.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm going to go onto the internet now. Can people still see the slide window? Henry, can people still see the slides window? Yes, 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 yes. Okay, enter a URL.
The web tour's just loading up for me. It might take a few seconds, guys, but Brian's going to share a website with us.
Well, I was just going to show a few books that would be useful reading.
It's coming for me now.
Google.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing Google.
Okay. Hopefully this will be right. The first book I was going to recommend is Scott Mccloud's Making Comics. I don't have my copy with me here this evening. Somebody in Works borrowed it, but it is very, very comprehensive. It goes into every detail, every aspect of making comics. Useful for beginners, useful for people who've already tried making comics and want new ideas. Maybe the picture's not going to come up there. Making Comics by Scott Mccloud. Oh, there we go. It's on my screen now. And Making Comics. The other one is called Going Graphic. By Stephen Carey. Let's see if we can get this up. Now, this book is just amazing. This goes into a lot of the pedagogy of why comics are good to use in the classroom. it has lots and lots of short activities that you can do for 30 minutes as a warmer, as a filler. If you just want to, if you've never used comics before, maybe you'd like to start with something that lasts only for one lesson. And he also has a lot of information about making a full comic with your students. So that's a great book to have in any resource shelf in a teaching center or school. So that's what I'd recommend, going graphic and making comics. Going graphic is particularly useful to us, comics at work in the multilingual classroom.
Excellent.
So we've got 220 people logged in here. Okay.
Check those out, everyone.
Yeah.
So I think,
and
Brian,
of course, you can go to any of my links here.
Yes. A few people asking what's the best way to contact you, Brian, if they've got any further questions. Should they tweet you or Facebook you?
Okay. I'm on Facebook more than Twitter. I am on Twitter and I do respond. Facebook.com GrammarmanHero. That second link there, that's Grammarman's Facebook profile. I check that pretty much every day. You can contact me through the Grammarman website. Yeah, there's all of these links you see on the screen now. Any of those, come and join me on Facebook. Come and hook up on Twitter. The second book I mentioned is called Going Graphic: Comics at Work in the Multilingual Classroom. Going Graphic. So it's specifically made with the intention of using comics to teach English as a foreign language, as a second language. And it's got lots of great examples, lots of great tips in there.
Posting a link in the chat box to where you can get that from as well, so people can click on that.
Excellent. I should have, yeah. Okay. That would have been easier. Yeah.
Right. So I think, Brian, that's all the questions I've seen for now. You've been talking for over an hour, so you must need a drink.
All right, Henry. Thanks a lot.
Thank you again for. It's getting very late there, isn't it? Thanks again for an excellent session. Yeah.
11 o'clock is right. All right. Cheers very much. Thank you. Thanks, Henry, and thanks very much, everyone who's joined in tonight. Nice to see you all here.
Okay.
That's been amazing.
Thanks to everyone else as well, as Brian said. Great to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Well, we're going to log out now.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.